Hello and welcome to another weekly update. I hope you're doing well. A couple of interesting things to talk about this week. I would say it is not a super busy week. The summer period is extending a little bit further than I thought it might. So maybe a couple more weeks of this before we kind of really pick up the pace again. But there are some things happening. There are teams still working and shipping. And that's what I want to jump straight into actually, because the Microsoft Graph API team have some updates to share, specifically around Microsoft Teams webinar registration. They've got a bunch of new APIs. They've been in beta for a while. We talked about this back in June, I think it was, when they became publicly available for beta. Well, they are now GA. So if you've got solutions that have been waiting on these, that you are waiting to put into production, you can now do that because these webinar APIs are now stable. They're in GA. That means you can rely on them and they're not going to get taken away or changed without large amounts of warning, which is good. We've got a blog post about it talking through the types of, or starting off actually with the types of meetings that are supported and the different types of meetings that Microsoft Teams supports. And then there's a bunch of new resources. If you're familiar with the beta version of this, I don't think there's big changes. It's just that a lot of this stuff is now available on the 1.0 endpoints. Just be aware in this blog post, a lot of these links actually link to the beta endpoint, not the 1.0. But when you get there, you can flip the toggle and you can now use the V1 endpoints as well. So that's all good. It's good to see the APIs keeping pace kind of with the new features. It's been a while, like these particular APIs have been a little while coming compared to like when the actual feature came out for webinar registrations and stuff like that. So I don't know, I would always want the APIs on the same day as the feature. I know that's unrealistic for lots of reasons. APIs are not as interesting to talk about, and I get that. But this is the next best thing. They do follow and they are there so that developers and ISVs and partners can build things on top of them. I think that's really important for the ecosystem and for the health of the platform. So this is good to see. It's good to see them going to V1 because it means we can rely on them now and we can put them in our solutions and know that they're still going to be there to rely on as we ship. So that's all good news. Other things that are happening. So the Azure Communication Services folk have done another monthly blog post talking about the things that they've been doing in August. There's quite a few things to go through, so I'm not going to go through them in loads and loads of detail here. Lots of good functionality. Again, this is really mirroring some of the things that you've seen happening in Microsoft Teams are now coming, bearing in mind, and I've talked about this lots if you've been to any of my talks and stuff, you'll know that underneath Microsoft Teams, the ICS, IC3 layer of communication and collaboration that powers all of Microsoft Teams is a platform that other things can use as well. One of those things is Azure Communication Services. So behind the scenes, all these Teams meetings and the functionality in them that we've seen is also available to developers. And it's just a case of lighting it up over time and making those API endpoints available and building it into the product. So lots of these things that we've seen in Microsoft Teams are now coming to Azure Communication Services, things like closed captioning, which is really cool, file support in meetings. This interesting idea around having specific roles and capabilities for rooms that you create in Azure Communication Services. That will be really useful to lots of people I know building out solutions where you kind of want those rules around who can do what inside a meeting space. Teams breakout rooms, really interesting. This is in public preview, so it's kind of really interesting. So Teams breakout rooms have always been a kind of very team-specific thing and not really something that you could build an SDK, you build a program around or an application around using the APIs or the SDKs. But this is kind of interesting. You can now have specific calling SDK participants and assign them to individual breakout rooms. Very cool. Means you could, what does this mean? It means that you could build a kind of front end, if you like, to some sort of platform where you've got maybe training or something remote like team building sessions. And you want people to have that breakout experience, but you want to provide a custom user interface, a custom front end, if you like, for those people to do that. I think you could do that using kind of some of this new stuff. And then this is end of call survey thing. I'm a bit confused by this, I'll be honest. As written on this blog post, it sounds like a really nice thing, this end of call survey to enable developers to customize and collect questions at the end of a call as feedback. And then they go on to give some good examples about, maybe you could use this in telemedicine. So you could ask for things like, ease of access, satisfaction with advice, all those sort of things. Really nice idea, end of call survey. Popular in the contact center space as well. So yeah, really good. I went to go through the documentation for this, and all the documentation appears to be around call quality surveys. I don't know how you can kind of take some of that stuff. Maybe you can customize. I didn't really see that, so I'm going to keep looking. Just being kind of completely open with you. I saw this whilst collating together the stuff for the week. Didn't actually see how you would take it from an end of call survey into a much more sort of business focused kind of survey. So I'm not sure if that is there yet, and if it's just the marketing message getting in front of the engineering, or whether the documentation's out of date, or whether I just wasn't looking properly. Not quite sure. Could be any one of those three things, with a heavy emphasis on me not looking properly. So, there is that. I'm going to try and find out for next week though. So yeah, ping me if you're interested, or if you know the answer. It would be good to kind of figure out what's going on there. And then something else, or last thing actually, really I want to talk about this week are new functions and features for GitHub Copilot that are coming into Visual Studio. And this is really interesting. So I still do day-to-day development, and GitHub Copilot has, of all the Copilots, I think GitHub Copilot has been the most revolutionary to how I work. And I'm finding more and more ways to use not just GitHub Copilot, if I'm honest, but generative AI in the field of development. Really interesting. And I think Microsoft are as well, honestly. And I think that's part of these new features. So the kind of tagline, if you like, of this whole blog post is that GitHub Copilot is getting smarter. And really what they mean is it's being built into more places. So you're going to see Copilot popping up in more places throughout your Visual Studio experience. And honestly, I think that kind of ties in with kind of what I was saying around just what do I mean? Like these kind of more ways, Microsoft finding more ways to do this kind of stuff, finding more ways to really dig in and understand where Copilot can help. And I think we're all on that journey together. So yeah, so things like, let me just skim down this blog post to try and find. So things like naming. So making suggestions for naming. This one's cool. I'd never even thought about this. AI generated breakpoint expressions. So conditional breakpointing is a thing that's been in Visual Studio for a while. Not that long. I remember it coming out actually. Conditional breakpoints, but knowing, like, figuring out that, okay, a conditional breakpoint would help me here, a conditional expression, and then trying to be like, okay, what's the actual conditional expression going to be? Having some help there, really helpful. What I found is that the LLMs can do a really good job within the boundary of a particular page or a class or a namespace, because it's a very constrained environment, and so it's fairly obvious what you're trying to do by your intentions or the surrounding code, and then the name of the method that you've called that you haven't yet written, or how you started off, the libraries you're using and stuff like that. It's fairly obvious to figure out what you're trying to do. So actually this is where AI can be really helpful. And so I think we will both be quite surprised and impressed by some of these things, because the things like the conditional expressions, it's going to be quite obvious to see what your intent is. So Copilot can really help there. So I think that's going to be really interesting. I think, yeah, like I say, Microsoft are on this journey as well of finding all the different places that Copilot can be useful. And so I think that's good for everybody. But yeah, so certainly my experience as well is that it's really kind of changing how I do development, and it's really interesting. And I've got thoughts on this. They're not very well sort of nailed down, and they're still evolving, so I'm going to think about them some more. But there's definitely something in that about how it impacts me versus how it impacts a more experienced or a less experienced developer as well, which is all kind of interesting. Anyway, all of that for next time. Hope you have a great week this week, whatever it is you're doing, and I will speak to you again next time.